What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. You're watching the channel Dr. Applesauce. My name's Will. It's another beautiful day here in Texas. I hope you guys know that I love you, God loves you, and that there is an awesome plan for your life. In this video, I'm going to be going over the key points of the final war arc of My Hero Academia and explaining the ending to you. So this is your fair warning. If you have not read all of the manga, if you are not caught up with the manga, we are going to be giving massive plot spoilers to My Hero Academia. So if you are anime only and you do not want spoilers, this is your warning. My Hero Academia is finally coming to a close. The manga is all but finished. As of my recording this right now, we're only waiting for one more chapter of the manga, and then it will be over. After 8 years on TV so far and about 10 years in manga form, the My Hero Academia epic is finally coming to a close. My Hero Academia's final war arc starts in chapter 343 and ends in chapter 423. That's 80 chapters, almost 20% of the entire My Hero Academia story, and a lot takes place in these 80 chapters. We see a lot of fantastic character developments, redemptions for some of the villains, almost to the point of feeling sorry for them, and that is something My Hero Academia has always done really well, humanizing and helping us understand some villains, because My Hero Academia takes place in a world where society has no place for people that have quirks that are weird or that don't fit in with society. And we see some of the most powerful villains in My Hero Academia become villains simply because their quirks didn't fit in with society, and they become shunned and ostracized and hated, and we see some of the most powerful villains come from this. The final war arc starts in a very organized way by exposing the UA Academy traitor that has been the traitor this whole time, Aoyama. Aoyama's family had been manipulated by birth by All For One, and after All For One transferred a quirk to the quirkless Aoyama as a baby, all this time, he had been giving All For One information about various locations of UA activities and helping the League of Villains find them. UA and the heroes managed to forgive Aoyama, and with Shinso's brainwashing technique, were able to get him to convince and lure All For One out into a trap without Aoyama thinking that he was betraying All For One or lying to him. Because if Aoyama had believed that he was lying, it would have tipped off All For One that he was being deceived. This set the bait for the trap that starts the final war arc. What resulted was an incredibly detailed plan to separate all of the most powerful League of Villain members, including Shigaraki and All For One, using Kurogiri's quirk, and then trap them in various scenarios with multiple heroes who are well suited to take them down. This goes off pretty well, but some of the heroes get separated, including Deku, who is supposed to end up with Shigaraki. He gets separated and taken into the warp gate with Toga, rather than the floating UA prison trap that was supposed to be for Shigaraki. At this point, there's a lot of battles that start happening. There is a ton that happens in the final war arc. I'm not going to be able to go over all of it, and all of this might not exactly be in chronological order, but I'm going to hit the main battles, the main plot developments, and some of the main character developments. After the heroes use Kurogiri's warp quirk in order to separate all of the League of Villain members and keep them isolated, one of the battles that we see is Ochako and Froppy versus Toga with a bunch of various other heroes and villains in the mix. They're transferred to an island that separates Toga from the rest of the battle, and this is important because Toga has the ability to morph into Twice and use Twice's quirk, Sadman's Parade. Sadman's Parade would have easily and quickly overwhelmed the entire battle, so it was very important to separate Toga to an area where that power would be neutralized. There is a lot that goes on with this battle, and this battle stretches over a large variety of time, where even they escape from the island and Sadman's Parade ends up overtaking a bunch of the battle. But throughout this battle, Ochako and Toga end up being the main combatants, and they fight pretty hardcore, and it's a brutal, vicious battle, both Ochako and Toga being very deeply wounded. But during this whole time, Ochako is telling Toga how much Ochako cares for Toga, how much good Ochako sees in Toga, how much Toga has value, and how she shouldn't have been treated the way that she had been treated. And essentially what happens is Ochako helps Toga fall even more in love with her, and helps Toga to see that somebody actually does see good inside of her. And ultimately, Sadman's Parade is defeated and Toga is defeated, but at the cost of Ochako being mortally wounded. And once Toga sees that Ochako is mortally wounded, she can't stand to imagine a world where Ochako doesn't exist. So after Ochako has sacrificed so much for Toga through this battle, Toga decides to use her quirk to transfer all of her blood to Ochako, thus saving Ochako's life and sacrificing herself for Ochako. Another key battle is the one between Todoroki and Dobby. Todoroki and Dobby, again with various other heroes and villains, get transported to a completely separate area because Todoroki is the one that is the best suited to combat and neutralize Dobby's flames with his massively powerful ice side of his quirk. After an incredibly fierce and emotional battle that is really well done in the manga, Todoroki manages to overwhelm Dobby with his new glacial Aegir attack, seemingly defeating Dobby. But in a last-ditch turn of events, right as Dobby's dying, Dobby's quirk activates and unleashes the latent ability that is his mother's frost side of their quirk. This saves Dobby's life at the very last moment. Ultimately, the entire Todoroki family, all the Todoroki children and even their mom come together and are able to subdue Dobby, thus ending the threat of his powers in the battle. I also would like to note the irony and the beautiful story writing and character development in Dobby that he had the latent ability inside of his quirk for the frost side of his power. And the whole reason all of this horrible trauma happened to him was because his flames were so strong and so powerful that he couldn't control them and they would burn him. If he would have been able to unlock that part of his power earlier on in childhood, it would have helped cancel out how strong his flames were and we would have seen a completely different Dobby. But that probably is by large part Endeavor's fault. Now, All For One was separated from everybody as well, and he was separated with Endeavor and Hawks. They decided to pit All For One against the current #1 and #2 heroes. And they had to separate him from Shigaraki because he needs to be within a certain proximity of Shigaraki in order to essentially merge with Shigaraki's body and take over Shigaraki's body, which was kind of his whole plan all along because All For One's original body is dying and on life support, hence the big, Darth Vader-esque mask. So Endeavor and Hawks are trying to defeat him during this battle, but ultimately they're just trying to keep him away from Shigaraki, but hopefully also defeat him as well. And during this battle, Endeavor is grievously wounded. He completely loses an arm, and in an epic scene in the anime that I think was one of those times that the anime does a way better job than the manga, he manifests this flame fist and goes on this crazy attack against All For One. Now, Endeavor and Hawks are really badly wounded in this battle, and Endeavor does a huge ultimate move that actually causes All For One to more or less die, but All For One busts out a trump card that's one of the quirk reversing, time reversing, rewinding bullets that were made from Ares' quirk, and he uses this as a trump card in order to rewind his body back to a younger state, which effectively heals him after Endeavor had almost defeated him. But there's a catch. This is a fatal trump card. Once All For One uses this trump card, he's on a clock. His body will be slowly reverting back to a younger state, and he will eventually cease to exist if he does not merge with Shigaraki's body quickly. Near the end of this battle, we see Hawks and Endeavor are deeply wounded as All For One manages to get closer and closer to Shigaraki. We mentioned earlier that Shigaraki was transported to this floating island prison that was very meticulously created just to hold Shigaraki. He was also transported there with Best Jeanist, with Mirko, with Edgeshot, the three of the top heroes of the time, as well as the big three from UA. We have Mirio, Sun Eater, and Neji Hado, as well as Bakugo, and Deku was actually supposed to be there as well. This was supposed to be the recipe that was able to defeat Shigaraki. Unfortunately, Deku was pulled in the wrong warp gate by Toga and is currently trying to use One For All in order to fly back and get to this battle with Shigaraki in time. During this battle, all of the three pro heroes and Mirio, Sun Eater, and Neji Hado give it their best, and they do everything that they can to fight against Shigaraki. But even with his quirks being suppressed, it is too much for them to really even harm him at all. In a really cool scene, Bakugo comes into this fight and releases this new ultimate move, this hugely powerful move against Shigaraki, and it does absolutely nothing to him. It's just not enough to stop the massively overpowered Shigaraki. And in this shocking scene, we see Bakugo going up against Shigaraki, and Shigaraki explodes and attacks Bakugo's heart. And we see this shocking scene where Bakugo falls to the ground, his heart exploded, clutching a card of All Might, thinking to himself that all he ever wanted was All Might's autograph. Next is the great battle between All For One and All Might in his weak form. As All For One has bested Endeavor and Hawks, and he's getting closer and closer to Shigaraki, and he's almost within range to use his Sludge Warp Gate technique, which is inferior to Kurogiri's warp technique, he gets approached and confronted by All Might, who's in weak form. But unbeknownst to everybody else, All Might has a secret weapon. All Might has an Iron Man-esque briefcase that launches this incredibly cool mechanical power suit that incorporates All Might's form and just surrounds him in a hugely powerful suit. This suit was created presumably by people from the support course and Mei Hatsume, I'm assuming, and it has used various quirks from various people to really just basically make a crazy cool power armor suit. This power armor suit is able to confront All For One and hold him back and really damage and hurt him. Now, even with this power suit, All For One is able to outmatch All Might just barely, but during this battle, as All Might is constantly beat and battered, he's realizing that the more damage he does to All For One, the faster All For One is reverting backwards and getting younger and younger and younger and younger. And he realizes that if he can continue to do enough damage, he could continue to make All For One revert back to such a young state that he wouldn't exist anymore. In a shocking development with Bakugo lying mortally wounded on the ground, seemingly dead with his heart exploded, Edgeshot reveals that he has a secret technique where he can make his body as thin as hair, and he can go into Bakugo's body and sew Bakugo's heart and insides back together. The only catch that when he uses this technique, he basically has to use his life force up with it, and he may never be able to return from that. But he decides that he would give his life to save Bakugo because Bakugo's skills and talents have the ability to outpass all of them and help the world in the future. As Edgeshot is doing this and sewing Bakugo back together from the inside, Bakugo's heart still isn't beating, but there is a single bead of sweat that contains nitroglycerin from Bakugo's quirk that gets into his bloodstream and explodes, thus starting his heart back up again. In an incredible display after this recovery, as the battle between All For One and All Might has gotten so close to the battle between Shigaraki and all the other heroes, Bakugo rockets over to that battle and attacks All For One with such ferocity over and over and over and over, and actually causes All For One to revert and heal back to his younger self over and over and over again until All For One emerges as a baby. In a crazy twist, Bakugo, a UA student, defeats All For One as he deals enough damage to cause All For One to revert to such a young age that he ceases to exist. All of these battles are spread out all over Japan, and there's a whole bunch of different things simultaneously happening. But as we see all these different various battles start to wrap up, the final battle is between Deku and Shigaraki. Deku finally makes it back to the battle with Shigaraki, makes a great entrance, and upon arriving, sees what he thinks is Bakugo's corpse before he's revived by Edgeshot. Upon seeing Bakugo's corpse, he almost does exactly what Shigaraki wanted him to do, which was to go into a rage and lose control. But the One-For-All users that reside inside of Deku, inside of the One-For-All powers, remind him not to lose control, and he's able to maintain control and enter into a fierce battle with Shigaraki. What results is an incredible battle between Deku and Shigaraki that I cannot do justice by explaining here. You gotta read the manga or wait until the episodes are actually animated. Ultimately, Deku realizes that he's just not powerful enough to defeat Shigaraki. Shigaraki has become way too powerful physically, but Deku notices that there is a crack in Shigaraki's subconscious. Shigaraki has this incredibly powerful subconscious defense built around his mind, full of hatred to the world, and Deku realizes that there's a crack in there when Shigaraki steals one of the parts of One For All from him. He sees this crack inside of Shigaraki's subconscious. He makes the crazy decision to willfully transfer One For All to Shigaraki by having Shigaraki absorb some of Deku's blood, and he willfully transfers One For All and all of the previous One For All users to Shigaraki so that they can enter that crack in his subconscious and fight and destroy Shigaraki from the inside. Ultimately, this works, and it weakens Shigaraki to such a point, though, that the tiny bit of All For One's subconscious that was buried and left inside of Shigaraki's body is able to rise up and take over Shigaraki's body finally, thus completing what All For One wanted all along, to transfer his mind into Shigaraki's body. This is where there is a crazy twist and a plot development that I did not see coming. This entire time we're hearing about Shigaraki, and we understand that he has such a vitriolic hatred towards society because of all the horrible things that happened to him as a child. His decay quirk was a quirk that was designed only to hurt and destroy, and he ultimately was shunned from society and his family after accidentally killing his entire family, and he was shunned by his dad because of his quirk, and his grandmother basically abandoning his dad so that she could be One For All hero. All of this leads to Shigaraki becoming somebody that hates society because he was not accepted because of his quirk, that has this intense vitriolic hate for the world so much that what he really wants to do is destroy the world. But when All For One takes over Shigaraki's body and believes that he has finally won, he reveals to Shigaraki that he has been manipulating and cultivating Shigaraki's every single moment of life from the very beginning. When Shigaraki was born, All For One knew that he was the grandson of Nana Shimura, who was a previous user of One For All, and he goes and strips away a quirk and gives a quirk to this baby. Now, what's interesting is he takes a quirk that had the ability to decay and the ability to restore, and he strips away the ability to restore and gives baby Shigaraki just the part of the quirk that can only decay and that can only destroy, and does this intentionally because he is Nana Shimura's grandson, and does this knowing that this boy having this quirk that can only hurt, kill, and destroy will cause him to be ostracized by society, will cause him to go through pain and hate, and really ultimately allow him to step in and manipulate and mold and cultivate Shigaraki to grow into the perfect host to transfer his mind to in the future. All of Shigaraki's hate, all of his loathing for society, all of his reason for existing, all of his being predicated on a lie, all of his hate rightfully belonged to All For One. Shigaraki is one of the biggest victims in the entire series. Not to say it's excusable for the horrible things that he's done, the many, many people that he's killed, but in a crazy twist of events, you see that Shigaraki ultimately has been a victim of All For One this entire time. This leads to a conflicting battle on the inside subconscious of Shigaraki / All For One, and ultimately, as Deku had transferred One For All to Shigaraki's body, thus winning Deku and the heroes the battle and winning them the day, but at the cost of Deku losing his quirk. Deku willfully transferred One For All away and now only has an ember of One For All inside of him. The final war arc of My Hero Academia ultimately ends on that note. Afterwards, we see some things happening in the manga to see that society is healing a little bit, that society has realized that they have done these things to create some of the biggest, worst villains in history by shunning people with quirks that aren't acceptable, that these people that can't control the quirks that they were born with. There is a beautiful depth in the character development in My Hero Academia. I will never accept and believe when people say that My Hero Academia is not deep and it's not well written. Yes, there are elements of the fan base that are a little bit weird. There are some cringy parts, but the character development and the writing in this story is absolutely amazing. The story that Toga goes through with her battle with Ochako, the redemption arc of Endeavor, going from an abusive father to realizing the horrible things that he's done to being willing to sacrifice and die just to show his children that he loves them. Deku going from being unpowered to the most powerful to unpowered. The crazy twist of fate that Shigaraki was All For One's victim the entire time and didn't really hate the world, hated All For One for what he did to him. And then the ending where All For One fades into existence and he mutters to his younger brother, who is the progenitor of One For All, "Please don't leave me. You're all I have." Showing that the greatest villain in My Hero Academia history was spawned from a desire not to be alone and not cultivated and coached well. He just stole from everybody and greedily said more. We see this beautiful amount of character development at the end of My Hero Academia, and specifically at the end of the final war arc, that shows how we should have compassion for people, and that even if you've done bad things, you're not completely lost. You can be redeemed. And I think it's such a beautiful lesson. The My Hero Academia Final War arc is essentially the end of the My Hero Academia story. As of the recording of this video, we do have one more chapter that will be released in about 4 or 5 days, probably a day or two after this video actually is uploaded, but that is the final battle and the culmination of all of the events of My Hero Academia. This is, in my opinion, the best superhero story ever written, and I don't think anybody can really refute that. Drop me a comment down below, guys. Let me know what you think. Have you gone through the My Hero Academia Final War arc? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. It's free for you to do. You can subscribe, hit the notifications. All of that's free and it helps me a ton. If you enjoyed this one, YouTube says you'll like that one. Check it out. And like I always say, find somebody to love and serve today. Be the change you want to see in the world. See you next time.